so happy to see you here early and ready to go on the statement of principles. This is a talk and a subject that I've been going all around the country talking on, and it is my absolute passion. I hope when at least some of you, I'm seeing spots, this is part of the problem, oh my God. I hope that some of you, when you leave here today, also will leave with the same passion. When I give this talk, it's usually at a dinner, and it's after a long day of bylaws and platform, which fortunately you guys did not have to suffer through. Well, you know me, I love it, but then again, I'm kind of a parliamentary masochist, so it's what I'm into. You know, we all have our kinks, don't we? But I usually say to somebody that this talk is going to be specifically for one person who is going to leave with a passion for history that they didn't realize that they had. Everyone is going to leave going, wow, that was interesting, and I learned something I didn't know before. But I find usually after each time, there's somebody who just freaks out like me and turns into another me. The one after I gave it in New Hampshire, I saw the same person in Ohio who said to me, "You made me cry." I'm like, really? He's like, "I couldn't believe what you were telling me." He's like, "I walked into it thinking it was going to be boring, but I have to say that afterwards, I just was so completely moved by it, I just couldn't believe it." So maybe there's one of you, so maybe you should get some tissues. I'm going to maybe make a grown man cry again today. So as an introduction, a lot of you know me, a lot of you may not. And sometimes I have to read my own bio, which is pretty funny. But I'm currently on the Libertarian National Committee. I'm Region 1 representative, which means that I represent 9 states that I have to say alphabetically, or I forget them. You would think after 2 years I wouldn't have to do that. So it's Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Hawaii, Kansas, Montana, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. See, 2 years, I finally got to say them, and now I'm not going to have this position anymore. And I'm running for LNC secretary in just over a month. Yay! But I have to tell you, the most heartbreaking thing for me, though, in deciding to run for secretary was deciding not to run for Region 1. I don't have any children myself, so I think I kind of adopted these 9 states as my children. And whoever comes along as my successor who doesn't treat them right, I might violate the NAP. So they have to be very, very careful. I'm so possessive. I'm such a mother hen to my 9 states. But I think I left them in good shape. I also used to be the communications director for the Libertarian Party of Colorado. I talk about my husband a lot in my talk. You heard it once before, but I've worked you into it a lot more now, so now you're going to hear a lot. So you're a part of a lot of my little stories I like to give. My husband's sitting right there. He's the state chair of the Libertarian Party of Colorado. And I became a libertarian before he did, at least officially, involved in the party, and I got involved really quickly. I'm from Florida originally, and I came to Colorado, and I work from home. And a lot of us don't realize how many friends we make at our workplace. Actually, most of our relationships end up getting made through our workplace. So I was in Colorado a year and a half, and I still didn't know anybody. And working from home, I was pretty isolated, and my husband was like, "You need to get out and do something. You need to get involved with something." And then this happened, and now he's kicking himself, wishing that he never told me that I needed to get out and get involved with something. And I got very involved with the Libertarian Party, and I joke that he got involved so he could see me. And now he's really involved. He's the state chair, and I pulled a really dirty trick on him because I was the communications director. He's like, "Great, I'll be state chair. We'll be working together all the time." He's state chair, and I quit. So now he's state chair, and he still doesn't see me because I'm no longer on the board of the Libertarian Party of Colorado because I'm concentrating on the national things. But I think you like it, right? I didn't pull too dirty of a trick on you? Okay, perfect. I also used to be the state coordinator for the Radical Caucus in Colorado. I've given up all of that to concentrate on party history and on national party politics type things. So in that vein, I am the chair of the historical committee of the Libertarian Party. When I joined the LNC, the very first motion I made, Kismet, was about party history. This wasn't my plan, this is just something that happened, but the very first motion I made on the LNC was about a site called Lpedia. If you guys haven't been to Lpedia, please go. If you've heard of Wikipedia, Lpedia is a wiki just for the Libertarian Party. And is a little bit different than Wikipedia, where Wikipedia is more articles. LPD is both articles and documents. It's a complete archive of the party. Also, we don't have like the really odd notability requirements that Wikipedia has. Wikipedia, unless you're like world famous, you can't have an article on yourself because you're not notable enough. That's kind of a blow to your ego when you think you're pretty notable, someone starts an article on you and they delete it saying, no, you're not that important. On LPD, if you've been a libertarian for 30 seconds, you're notable, and you should have an article on yourself. So we allow you to start your own articles, unlike Wikipedia, because who knows more about you than you? And if you write a fluff piece that's false, we trust the community to come along and correct it. So go start your own article, because you actually are a living piece of party history. And we want each of these pieces to come together. So LPD is a collaborative history of the Libertarian Party, and you are a part of it. Please go, get an account, and add your little bit of history. You know something about your state party or your state movement or some other bit that no one else knows. And 10 years from now, we want other people to know that too. I have found right now that we're coming into decades and decades of the Libertarian Party history, that our early party history is about to be lost. One of our party founders is here, D. Frank Robinson. If you'd raise your hand, I'll be weaving him into this narrative. And unfortunately, other party founders aren't with us, such as Mr. Nolan. And as that happens, we are in danger, literally, of losing our history. I'm going to give one poignant example of it. Is there was a tape of a McBride speech from the 1970s. I've learned more about archaic video formats than I ever wanted to know when I got into the record. So this was a 2-inch broadcast, it's helical tape. It turns out there's only one of these machines left in the entire world, I think. It's in Massachusetts at the Museum of Broadcast History, which sounds really fancy, but I found out the Museum of Broadcast History is just one guy, and it's his bedroom, and that's the Museum of Broadcast History, and he has this machine. We sent it to him, and as he converted it, it literally disintegrated. So we have a digital copy, but we were at the last possible moment that it probably could have been saved. A year later, and it would have been gone. So we are at that cusp. I think I came at the right time, at the right point in history. I've got a little bit of woo in me, which means I think things happen for a reason. If you don't have woo, just ignore that, because I'm going to be telling you a lot of woo stories, but I do think it all came together at one time, for such a time as this sort of thing. So I have to put on my old lady glasses because I am getting a bit older. So I've given this presentation in about 15 states, I think now, and also part of it on the Tom Woods Show. My husband's heard part of it. He's heard this part, and I'm going to joke about you again. You just did not know how much I use you as a prop during my thing. The first time my husband heard this presentation, I think he thought he had heard everything I had to say before. We used to share an office together in our home. And all I did was talk all day, nonstop, about Libertarian Party stuff. So I swear he went and got an office off-site just because. He didn't want to hear it all day anymore. And I know that's true, even though you say it's not. So when he first came to the presentation, I think he thought he heard everything before. So I knew this was coming. And I saw he was sitting there fiddling with his phone or whatever. And I said, you know, guys, I have a confession to make. It's a dirty confession, and it's somewhat embarrassing, but I'm having an affair. And your head jerked up. Your head jerked up and was like, what did she just say? And then I said, well, the affair that I'm having is with the Libertarian Party and the Statement of Principles. And you went, I know that already. And you then promptly went back to your phone. But it actually is true. I'm having a torrid, steamy affair with the Statement of Principles. And I'm going to share some of that affair with you today. All of us have our libertarian stories of how we became a libertarian, either big L or little l. I think some of us, though, have unusual stories. You know, we saw Ayn Rand in a piece of bread, and she spoke to us, you know, like Jesus coming in a vision. That didn't happen to me. But what did happen to me is I was in a Facebook debate one day. I was a Republican, conservative, evangelical, Christian Republican. Not really a Republican. As I said, I was a Christian. Came from a church where if you were a Christian, you were a Republican. It came right along with the Lord's Prayer. You went and changed your voter's registration. So when I became a Christian, I switched from Democrat to Republican because that's what you did in the Calvary Chapel movement. Some of you may be familiar with that. I don't think it's as big here as it was in South Florida, where I was from. And it's kind of the hippies of the evangelical movement. So I switched, but I didn't really do anything. I didn't even vote. So it's really interesting I'm so involved in politics now because I hated it. I still hate it, actually, but I hated it so much then that I didn't even vote. I would throw away all of the sample ballots that came in, except for the one for Gore that had the hanging Chad issue because I'm going to sell it at some point. It's got to be worth money at some point, that Florida ballot. So here we are. How did then I go from being a completely apolitical, anti-political person to where I am now? Well, it was a Facebook debate with some Christians. And they were debating as to whether or not we should put spikes under overpasses to keep homeless people from sleeping there. And they were all in favor of it. And I was completely aghast. I was more aghast on Christian grounds, not political ones. And so I started arguing that that's terrible. Why would you do that? These aren't dogs. These are human beings. And I wouldn't put spikes anywhere to keep a dog from sleeping. Why would you do this to a person just because they happen to be less fortunate? And I started getting called all kinds of names. I think libtard was one of them. And I didn't have pink hair at that time. Right now everyone assumes like the pussy hat wearer, you know, in the Women's March because I have pink hair. They just assume you're like a progressive, and I'm not. I find that quite amusing. I wasn't as crazy then. I had just normal hair, and they called me a libtard. And if you were from those Republican Christian evangelical circles, you know, calling a liberal, they might as well have called you Judas. It was horrible. I was aghast. So in order to get out of this as quickly as possible, I did what's called an ass fact, which is pulling a fact out of your ass and hoping nobody notices. I think we've all done this in Facebook debates. So I said, no, I'm not a liberal. I think I'm more of a libertarian. I didn't know what that meant. And there was another time in my past in a theological debate where I pulled out something and said I was it, and it turned out I didn't know what it meant, and it turned out to be something pornographic. And that was quite embarrassing. So now I've learned whenever I say something and I don't know what it means to immediately go and look it up so that I can make the appropriate retractions if necessary. So I went and looked it up. I did a search and found out, okay, I guess the Libertarian Party is the best place to look at what a libertarian is. I went to their platform. I read the statement of principles and the preamble. I didn't get past those two. I eventually did read the rest of it, but I went to read the statement of principles, the preamble, and the next browser tab I opened up was for the Secretary of State of Colorado, switched my voter registration on the spot to the Libertarian Party. That's how much those two statements moved me. I read it and my jaw dropped open. It was literally a come to Jesus moment. I'm like, oh my God. This is actually what I think that I've never heard put into words. I was like, this is just beautiful. It makes so much sense. And I still had no intention on being politically involved. I just liked what I read, so I signed up for it. My poor husband, I'm mentioning you again, was out because it was lunch break. Again, we both work from home. He came back, and I said, hey, Wayne, I changed my voter registration. And he was like, to what? You don't even vote. I said, well, to libertarian, and the rest is history from there. We met online. We're one of these modern couples that met online and dated, so he met this quiet, conservative, apolitical girl online, and now look what you got, right? I hope you're not having buyer's remorse, but it turned out to be way different, didn't it? And it probably would have stopped there. I probably would have started voting, but I wouldn't have gotten involved, and then came the T-shirt. And what I mean by that is I was on Facebook still, obviously, and that ad came up from National with that black T-shirt, that black long-sleeve T-shirt that said Libertarian. I said, join the National Party and get a free shirt. And I looked at that, and I'm like, damn, I want that shirt. And I let it go. I saw it again, and I'm like, oh, man, I really want that shirt. So I joined to get the shirt. No noble intentions. I joined to get the shirt, and then I started getting the literature, and I got really, really sucked in. But it's that magic shirt. I have some of them out there. If you would like to join the National Libertarian Party today for $25, I will give you one of those magic black T-shirts, and you may find yourself exactly where I am right now, because I swear there's some witchcraft in that shirt. But I also have the Lady Liberty one. Please join the National Party today. If I shoot off my mouth a lot, and I said I would sign up 150 members by convention. I think I'm at 105, and I will be really embarrassed if I don't able to live up to that brag. So I do come bearing T-shirts, so see me outside if you would like to join the National Party, and we do put that money to very, very good use. We pinch each penny until it yells, till it shrieks. So you've gotten the background as to why I'm interested in this subject. And the words of the preamble then and the statement of principles, I don't think I'm exaggerating to say they literally changed my life. I'm a full-time paralegal, so I'm professional in the law field. I work a lot of hours. I also put in about 45 hours a week in volunteer time to the Libertarian Party. It's my life. I have a full-time volunteer position, basically, and a full-time job. Am I exaggerating, Wayne? No, I'm not. You're nodding. Am I exaggerating? Or am I not exaggerating? Okay, I just want to make sure you nodded. I'm like, are you actually saying I'm lying to these people? Okay. You got to cooperate here. I know I didn't coordinate this with you, but you need to cooperate. So it did change my life. It changed my life. I'm not exaggerating to say it changed my life as much as my religion did. You know, it was really like when I became a Christian. So I decided to figure out how all this started, where it came from, why, where were we at, why didn't more people believe this type of thing. And let's see, I go off script too much, and then I have to find a spot in my notes to try to get back on the program. All right, so we're going to start with the statement of principles. And how many of you here are actually members of the Libertarian Party? You know, either voter registration, even if it's not formal. Okay, so most of you are big L libertarians, a couple small L libertarians. And I know you're a traitor there. Yes, I know. I'm going to consider you a big L, even though you've stabbed me in the heart. I know. You're trying to rub salt in the wound. Cut it out. Thank you. All right. Most of you may have heard the term statement of principles and know that we're the party of principle, right? Allegedly, we're the party of principle. And most of you probably read it at one time. I hope so. At one time, all of our party literature had it on it. We don't anymore, and I think that's a problem. I'd hope to see that change. But there's something different hearing something spoken than reading it. And that's something that religious communities know very well, and I hope not to offend anyone. Again, because I'm a Christian, that's what I'm steeped in. I give a lot of religious analogies, biblical analogies. It's not to preach to you. It's to bring literature. It's more like, I could quote from the Quran as well. It's to bring literature in our lives, tradition in our lives, and it helps people connect. So don't be offended if I bring those analogies in. It's not to preach to you. I'm not that kind of Christian. I'm very laid back. So one thing, though, you learn in church, preachers know that the spoken word gets to your heart in a way that the written word doesn't. That to read the Bible is different than just than speaking the Bible. So I'd ask you to indulge me because I'd like to read out loud to you the statement of principles. It will have a different impact on you than reading it. And those of you who have been a libertarian for a long time probably haven't stepped back in a while to realize how revolutionary what we think is. And if you remember that these were written in 1971, 1972, it was finalized in 72, but in that era, how really revolutionary these words were. We've come a long way in some senses in personal freedom. Got to realize, back then, it'd probably be scandalous for a woman to be quite as outspoken as I am. You couldn't be openly gay. There were a lot of things that then I don't think we really appreciate what we have today. We like to think of how bad we have things, but we have things very good in some other ways. So, without further ado, I am going to read to you the Holy Scripture. So, the statement of principles. Just take a listen. We, the members of the Libertarian Party, challenge the cult of the omnipotent state and defend the rights of the individual. We hold that all individuals have the right to exercise sole dominion over their own lives and have the right to live in whatever manner they choose, so long as they do not forcibly interfere with the equal right of others to live in whatever manner they choose. Governments throughout history have regularly operated on the opposite principle, that the state has the right to dispose of the lives of individuals and the fruits of their labor, Even within the United States, all political parties other than our own grant to government the right to regulate the lives of individuals and seize the fruits of their labor without their consent. We, on the contrary, deny the right of any government to do these things and hold that where governments exist, they must not violate the rights of any individual, namely, the right to life. Accordingly, we support the prohibition of the initiation of physical force against others. The right to liberty of speech and action. Accordingly, we oppose all attempts by government to abridge the freedom of speech and press, as well as government censorship in any form, and the right to property. Accordingly, we oppose all government interference with private property, such as confiscation, nationalization, and eminent domain, and support the prohibition of robbery, trespass, fraud, and misrepresentation. Since governments, one instituted, must not violate individual rights, we oppose all interference by government in the areas of voluntary and contractual relations amongst individuals. People should not be forced to sacrifice their lives and property for the benefit of others. They should be left free by government to deal with one another as free traders. And the resultant economic system, the only one compatible with the protection of individual rights, is the free market. That's like, to us, yep, we shrug. You know, that is quite scandalous to the outside world. And I want you to get that reinvigorated in you, really, that we have a revolutionary idea. So as we go through the history of these words, I want to remind you that this is a bit of archaeology. So it's a work in progress. After every presentation, someone comes up to me and says, you had X wrong. I love that, because this is digging up history. I'm going to have some things wrong, and I hope that more people will fill in the pieces. For instance, last time I had attributed something to Harry Brown that apparently wasn't original to him, that he got from somebody earlier. Great. I love to hear that. So if you hear anything that I say that you can add to, please grab me afterwards. This isn't a pride thing. This is a collaborative research thing. So I hope you do have some information. And this man right here was instrumental. I'm changing my presentation up a bit because I usually don't have D. Frank here. But what really encouraged me is I did this research, I came to my conclusions, and then I ran them by D. Frank, and he's like, you have it right. You have it right. So it was somebody who was there who said, okay, your methodology is good. I didn't come to him first. I did it first and then came to him. And he said, yep, you got it. Well, you corrected me in a few points, which was wonderful. But you were like, the basic thing, you do have it. And that becomes really important because the conclusions I came to are vastly different from what you hear in the party. We've changed our history, I think, a bit. So as I worked my way back into time, I've discovered that important pieces of our history have been obscured and lost and miscast and sorely neglected. And the miscasting in most cases was inadvertent, bad information. Unfortunately, I have to say, but this is minority of people, our history has been deliberately miscast in some times, has been deliberately rewritten in some cases. And I'm here to pull that away and to reshine a light back onto what we almost lost. So we're going to go back into the history of the party. Anytime I get something wrong, D. Frank, just start. You can heckle. I give you permission to heckle. And if you have something to add, raise your hand. Let's make this a little bit more interactive, because I usually don't have you here, and this is going to be fantastic. So the first convention of the Libertarian Party took place in Denver. Yay, Denver, Colorado. It took place in Denver in 1972, and it was a very motley crew of minarchists, anarchists, a lot of Randians, classical liberals, and then, you know, as libertarians tend to be, we'll have our own little shades in between. But they were all united around the idea of radical individualism. And yes, I went there. I said the word radical. For some reason today, we fear that word, and we fear applying it to ourselves. I guess because, you know, the vision comes into mind of, you know, Guy Fawkes masks and Molotov cocktails. That's not what we mean by radical. It means getting to the root of something, to getting to the actual root of something. And here, it's radical individualism. So the Libertarian Party was founded as a revolutionary movement. It was a peaceful revolutionary movement, but never ever lose track of the fact that we are, in fact, a revolution nonetheless. And any current perspective that does not come to grips with what the early party actually said, did, and stood for, they are cutting off the branch upon which we sit. And that's fine, you can do that, but that's not the Libertarian Party anymore. It could be something worthwhile, it could be something good, but it's not this. You know, as Ayn Rand would say, A is A, right? A is not B. So make no doubt about it, we still remain a radical, revolutionary idea of individualism if we're going to be true to what the party started as. Yeah, yes, you can. I'll do the please clap a lot if you don't. You know, please clap. So some party founders, such as D. Frank Robinson sitting there, were concerned that once the party got started, that, as groups of humans will do, entrenched interests would come in, there would be cults of personality, and principles would inevitably start to get watered down in favor of people's own power trips or their own ideas. There would be power struggles, there would be cliques, and those had the potential to turn this revolutionary idea into just, you know, that was nice, also ran, also tried, you know, I hate to say it, even like sometimes the idea of the founding of our country, right? How long was it until the Whiskey Rebellion happened? That was so different from what was intended, right? It can happen so quickly, even with the best intentions. And we did not want to be another quaint footnote in history. So I'm going to now, this is so weird with you right here, D. Frank, because here's where I go in my talk. A young D. Frank Robinson of Oklahoma. You told, and this, why don't you come up here for a second, for this bit, for how this happened. And I'm going to give what you told me, and then I'm going to ask you to give a few words in supplement to what I said. So a young D. Frank Robinson of Oklahoma and Ed Carlson, they devised a plan to keep our party on its principles. And as you described it to me, it was to embed, basically it's a booby trap. He didn't say that, but it's a booby trap. It's a self-destruct mechanism, an article of faith into the party that could not be altered by anyone without a super majority and a super quorum. Most of us are familiar with super majorities. Very few of us are familiar with super majorities and the idea of a super quorum. And that was approved. But would you give just like a few minutes on, you know, that article you wrote, I was about to quote you with the tether and don't go far from it or you may perish, but I'd rather hear that from you rather than me quoting you. So if you could take a few minutes to tell us about that, I'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Caryn Ann.
I have your speech here. Right here is where I quote you. Let me find it. Right here.
Yeah.
The young D. Frank Robinson, I have you here with your fiery revolutionary spirit.
Well, yeah, I was a lot younger then, but I want to make it clear that David F. Nolan was younger than me. He's 14 months younger than I was when we founded the party. I was born in September of 42, and he was born in November of 43. So we were both, quote unquote, so-called war babies. And all our siblings and people exploded after the war was over. But we were a rare breed because there were very few of us born during the war. But anyway, so David was 14 years my junior. However, he was my senior in many ways. As she gave me as a quotation here, to plant a rhetorical stake in the ground with a tether, that is the statement of principles, and a terse one, to document everything that was going to come afterwards. And this anchor would be, don't tread too far from this statement of principles or you may perish. If you stay close, you may eventually prosper in your efforts. Now, one thing which I have probably not in the past, in any cases when I've been speaking to a group of people, I have failed to give, I believe, sufficient credit to David F. Nolan. I'm sorry, I still get kind of broke up when I realize that he's no longer with us. But David actually founded the Libertarian Party twice. Not only in 1972, when he chaired the convention, they appointed me to be the bylaws committee chair. but also again in 1974. Here's the way it worked. Just as she was referring to, we have the supermajority rule to enshrine and embed and entrench the statement of principles at the core of the Libertarian Party, regardless of who comes and who goes and whatever else they may say off the record, on the record, or any time. You can always go back and say, is that consistent with the statement of principles, Mr. Candidate for X, Y, or Z? Okay, David, I believe, founded the Libertarian Party in 72, and in 1974, he saved the Libertarian Party from imploding at the Dallas Convention. When I first presented the 7/8 rule to David in Denver, I asked that we only be able to amend the statement of principles at the subsequent following National Convention by a 3/4 vote, because I wanted it sunk into the ground deep. David said, no, I think we need to go for a 2/3 vote at the next convention. A one-time, one-convention rule only. In 1974 at Dallas, I was there, we had to reach what has now been called the Dallas Accord.
And we'll be going into great detail on that, yeah.
Okay. But procedurally, the situation was this. If David had not had the superior judgment over mine to make the rule 2/3 to amend the statement of principles instead of 3/4 as I had intended, I don't think we would have had the Dallas Accord. And therefore, David F. Nolan saved the Libertarian Party from imploding in 1974. That's my conviction. I'd like to turn it back to you now.
Thank you, and I will be getting you some more.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, so thank you.
Okay. You need to sit up here?
It's up to you. You could sit. It's totally up to you. If you're more comfortable sitting, we'll bring you up. Whatever you'd like to do. D. Frank has been monumental in my life. I don't think he realized how important he's been. And I think in some sense that I've been very important to you, that to see a new person come into the party, because I saw it in my interactions with you, that you felt like here's decades down, and something that you did, now you're seeing somebody who was just a baby when you did it, taking the torch and moving forward with it. And at least that's the impression I got. So I hope we've been mutually encouraging to each other, but you've meant a great deal to me.
Thank you.
Oh, my thing went down. Oh, thank you. Oh, there you go again. I think if you go to view and then like a focus. There you go. Okay, we will be getting to that stuff now, because now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. So, D. Frank had said to me, yes, this is the anchor and the lifeline. Do not tread too far from it, or you may perish. If you stay close, you may eventually prosper for your efforts. So in 1972, that, as he said, that's what they did. They passed a Declaration of Principles. It was originally debated and called a preamble. So if you go through party records, you might get confused. It wasn't called the Statement of Principles at that time. And they secured its survival by demanding that it can only be amended by a 7/8 vote of registered delegates at convention. Now, I want you to let that sink in. 7/8 vote of registered delegates at convention. Is it possible, then, to amend the Statement of Principles? Yes, but 7/8 vote of registered delegates at convention. If any of you have been to a national convention, you know that there isn't 7/8 of registered delegates on the convention floor at any one time anyway. Basically, it was a fancy parliamentary way of saying, too bad, so sad, you can't amend it. I mean, there's a chance. If any of you watch Dumb and Dumber, film I like a lot, you know, when he was going up to that very beautiful woman and is like, is there a chance in a million you might date me? And she's like, okay, maybe 1 in a million. He's like, I've got a chance. No, you don't. That's what it's like. So if you think it's going to get amended, you are taking the Jim Carrey role in Dumb and Dumber. So there you go. Now, I'm losing again. One second. Okay. So the idea was, it was intentionally made almost impossible, because the idea was, If still at least 1/8 of the delegates believe in the foundational vision of the party, too bad, you can't change it. And if you can't even round up 1/8 of the delegates to stand on principles, the party then, as founded, had already died, and that convention would just be the public declaration of its demise. It wouldn't have been that vote that killed it. If you couldn't even get 1/8 of people to do that, then it was gone probably years ago. Now, the initial founders, D, Frank, and David Nolan, everyone realized that this was serious. Basically, what they were doing was building a vault, stepping inside, and then destroying the key. And the Statement of Principles in 1972 passed unanimously. There was about 78 to 80-ish delegates there. Now, you know, two libertarians can't pass something unanimous between the two of them. Sometimes I'm convinced one libertarian can't pass something unanimously by themselves. So if you imagine 78 to 80 of them pass this unanimously, you might think that libertarians were different then. D. Frank had in his basement tapes from the 72 and 74 convention that we've since put into digital form. So I listened to the 72 convention. They weren't any different. You know that guy? We all know that guy. He's mostly on Facebook right now, but that guy was at that convention. There was that guy who argued about everything. Oh my God, that guy goes to every convention. So that guy was there, and apparently they either tied up that guy and put him in the bathroom or during that vote, or he also consented to this. So after it passed unanimously, they realized how serious this was, though. They were all there. They were hot and heavy. They're doing this revolutionary thing, and realized that maybe a week later they might have some remorse about it. So they gave themselves a 2-year cooling off period, and said they put in an escape hatch. They said that the Statement of Principles could be amended by a 2/3 vote at the 1974 convention. Then the 7/8 rule would be permanently locked into place. And yes, as D. Frank had said, he originally wanted 3/4 and not 2/3. Got convinced to have 2/3. That will become very important in a moment. So we're going to take a close look at what happened at the 1972 and the 1974 conventions, because D. Frank is quite right. There were 2 foundings of the party, and we could have went an entirely different way. And I'd never thought of it that way, so you just gave me another perspective on it. So at the initial convention in 1972, here's where we're going to get to the handout. So you back there, you need to wake up. Scroll down. Oh, I can look here. If you scroll down to figure 1, please. Right there. This is an article from the 1972 bylaws. We had a constitution and bylaws, and you don't care about that. Let's just call it the bylaws. So this article embedded and solidified the idea that there would be foundational principles of the party, and it would give primacy of place to the to-be-created Statement of Principles. Interestingly, when they wrote this bylaw, they hadn't written the Statement of Principles yet. So they were codifying there that we would have principles, it's going to be decided, but there is, codifying it. Now, what's remarkable, because again, we're libertarians, this article has not substantially changed from then till now, from 1972 to now, except for the deletion of that 1974 escape hatch, and some language was moved around. We like to do that, and we'll probably move it back to where it was before. I just don't know why we do that, but we do. So if you could scroll down to figure 2, well, that is our current bylaws. As you can see, it's pretty much the same. We numbered it and did a little fancification, but it's the same. And that is very significant. So I'm going to make a claim here that might tick some people off, or it might surprise you, because we've become very loosey-goosey in this postmodern world where we're like, libertarianism is basically whatever you want it to be. It's like silly putty, right? You can't define it, right? You need to make a distinction here. You have libertarians, big L and small l, and you have the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is its own entity. It's not a person, but it's its own entity that when all of us are gone, hopefully there will still be a Libertarian Party. Different individuals will be in it, but it's the same party. So it has an existence outside of ourselves. So the Libertarian Party as an entity does, quote unquote, believe something. It might differ from what you believe. And that's very important to remember. So anyone who says, I'm now going to refer to it as Libertarian Party libertarianism. Anyone who says that Libertarian Party libertarianism cannot be defined is quite simply, in my more rough way of putting it, feeding you some bullshit, but in my more polite way of putting it, they're either ignorant of or ignoring our bylaws. That bylaw says what Libertarian Party libertarianism is. It is the statement of principles, as declared by the formative years and conventions. That is the benchmark. We like to talk today, and I'll get into it in a minute. We like to talk today about the big tent. For some reason, we love that word. That's like the mantra, the big tent. We want a big tent party. How I can call... I'll get into this. It's a thing that kind of bothers me, because here's the funny thing. I believe in the big tent. But I think sometimes the way we defend it, we might as well just call it the big top, because it's a big circus and it means nothing. I believe in the big tent. I don't believe in the big top. The big tent would accommodate a wide plethora of views. And I agree with that. But those wide plethora of views is not essential libertarianism. And what it should mean, the big tent, and the big tent I hold, is that anyone who's willing to go in our direction is fully welcome as an active, valued member of the party for as long as they're willing to go in that direction and sign our membership pledge. But the tent of essential libertarianism is circumscribed by the statement of principles. Anything that falls outside the statement of principles falls outside the big tent. There's our tent. But what people need to realize is you might not always be in the tent. The tent is not a prison. So if you don't agree with the statement of principles at some point, it doesn't mean you're not a libertarian. We need to stop that kind of crap. It just means you went outside the tent for a little bit and maybe, went and hung out with some other group for a while. There's nothing wrong with that. When you go camping, right, you want to visit with your neighbors. You're not locked in the tent. But let's not pretend that these deviations are libertarian ideas. They're not, and that's okay. We need to stop this whole, if you don't agree 100%, you're not a libertarian. No, you just have some non-libertarian ideas. And aren't we all like that? Very few of us could be put in one box or one tent, as it were. I think my particular positions are libertarian, but as far as the Libertarian Party goes, I hold a big heresy. I'm pro-life. The Libertarian Party is pro-choice. That's okay. I'm not in the tent on that one. I go and hang out with some other people for that one. It doesn't mean I'm not a libertarian, but we shouldn't be insulted if someone says you're not a libertarian on that issue. I would encourage everyone, when you disagree with someone, stop saying they're not a libertarian. Deal with issues and say, well, I don't think that's a libertarian idea. When you stop attacking people's identities, things get a lot nicer. And so I would suggest that. And so when is somebody not a libertarian? When more ideas of theirs than not aren't libertarian. And then I don't even think they would claim that they were. So I hope that's useful. I think that will help us moving on. So any member obviously is free to disagree with anything in the statement of principles, but the party itself believes this. The party itself can be defined. Oh, God, here I go. Wayne, I might need a soda. Wayne, I might need a soda. I think they have some out there on the thing. All right, so further protections were put into place to challenge anything that might contradict the statement of principles. Because you might go, it's well and good, you got this document. You've got this document. Any of you who watched the Game of Thrones, you know where Cersei was given that document from Ned Stark, and she looked at it and just went, that's nice, Hopefully you watch Game of Thrones. If you don't, you're missing out. Anyway, so you have this document. What good does it do us? Well, we have a judicial committee in the Libertarian Party. It's kind of like the Supreme Court, who's supposed to interpret things and weigh it according to our Constitution. Of course, they don't do that, but that was the idea, right? They would determine if something was unconstitutional. We have a judicial committee who is supposed to determine if things are, what would be instead of unlibertarians, whatever, against the statement of principles. And that was its original purpose. Now, over the years, it's gained some other functions. I say accrued them like a barnacle on a ship. But it really, because the Judicial Committee was your brainchild, from what I understand.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So if we go to figure 3, you could see, oh, I keep looking up there when I've got this screen here. Did he leave me? Did he leave me from back there? Okay, so figure 3, Judicial Committee, 1972. Its primary purpose was to be a watchdog over the statement of principles. That watchdog function remains today. And it has expanded in some bad ways and in some good ways, but the way it's expanded in a good way is, if you scroll down to figure 4, which is our current bylaws, you could see there are some other functions that include resolutions. If we go to convention and we all resolved that building the wall is great, we could challenge that and take it to the Judicial Committee and say that goes against the statement of principles. So you don't have to worry about a rogue convention resolving all kinds of weird things. He told me to start late, so if you want to talk to David and see what he wants to do. So that watchdog function remains today, and it's expanded. Could someone grab David, though, about the scheduling thing so we can get with Dr. Phillies and see if someone could go grab David Demarest, please? So also at the time that these articles were passed, the affirmation of the statement of principles was made an absolute condition of affiliation with the National Party. If you scroll to figure 5, you'll see that. Our affiliates are very autonomous, but there is one thing they have to do. They have to agree with the statement of principles. If they don't, you cannot be an affiliate of the National Party. So the initial platform committee, chaired by Pip Bowles, set to work writing this statement. And the initial result was deemed to be unsatisfactory. It had all the hallmarks of being written by a committee. And you know sometimes documents written by committee, they read like Xerox copy machine, instruction books. So it was recommended that submissions be taken from the delegates to submit proposals, in addition to the one that was proposed by the platform committee, which would then be considered by the delegates. So during debate on the adoption, there were multiple proposals put forth. And Tony Nathan, who some of you know, did something wonderful at that time. They were debating, should we write our principles first? Yes, thank you. Should we write our principles first, or should we write our platform first? And Tony Nathan, in her wonderful voice, said, "We will be the laughingstock of the world if we adopt planks without first specifying our principles." I loved hearing that on that 1972 tape. So the delegates considered the 5 proposals, which are in the handout. Well, it's not a handout now, it's on the screen, as figures 6 through 10. I will let you guys know afterwards where you can find this online if you want to read it in depth, because he's just going to be able to scroll through these. But what's interesting is I don't think anyone had seen these. I think these were lost until I transcribed them from those 1972 tapes. And it's very interesting. Some of these proposals were quite, I guess, I'll use the word interesting. They were very, very Randian. And I think we should be glad that some of these were not passed, because they would sound quite strange today. If any of you have read Ayn Rand, there's one of these statements that say, man is not a sacrificial animal. That was Ayn Rand's big thing. Like, some of these were just basically excerpts from John Galt's speech, which is fine for Atlas Shrugged, might not be so great as their statement of principles. So I'm glad some of those didn't pass. But the one that passed was the one written by John Hospers. John Hospers also, too, had a wonderful voice. And this is where I get a little wooey or a little geeky. When I was listening to that 1972 tape, I was listening to them arguing about the statement of principles, and John Hospers went up last, and he went to the microphone. And in his wonderful, distinctive voice, he got up and said, "We, the members of the Libertarian Party, you know, challenge the cult of the omnipotent state. And I realized at that time that that was probably the first time those words were ever said out loud, and I did literally cry listening to that tape. It gave me like the goosebumpies, you know. And I'll be extracting that and making that available for everyone, just as a clip on its own, also that Tony Nathan thing, because that was wonderful. So the Hosper's proposal passed, and I think it's like the last one. If you just scroll through all, I think it's go all the way through to number 12, because I'm going to go right there. That is the Hosper's proposal. And I had this bad photocopy of that he proposed at the 72 convention. I was so thrilled to have this photocopy that survived. I'm going to go off script again here today, and basically, I don't know where Dr. Phillies went. Until David Demarest tells me to shut up, or you guys tell me to shut up, I've got a lot of information to present, and I can go a long time. So, we're going to tell a little story here. I had this wonderful, right? So, that is what was passed. One day, I was scrolling through eBay, looking. I usually go on eBay for jackets, shoes, and this wonderful eBay jacket, right? This was brand new, and I got it for $10. But that's what I do on eBay. I don't go looking for political stuff on eBay, but I just, on a lark, on a wild hair, decided I was going to look for, I wonder what they got for Libertarian Party stuff on eBay. And the first thing that came up was something that said, original copy of the preamble. And they called it the preamble because that's what it says, but it is the statement of principles. And I looked at it because I had this photocopy, and I'm like, oh my God. I knew it was genuine because I could compare it to this. I'm like, oh my God, somebody does have the original. Where has it been? Who is this person? And, you know, much like consternation happened amongst my friends, and we were like, oh my God, we have to buy this. It was like, it was only like $10 or something at the time. Like, we have to buy this. So we were watching it and putting in bids, and it was going up hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and the seller was not responding to any of my messages to her, begging her to donate it to the Libertarian Party, or at least tell us who got it so that we could keep track of it. And we had the highest bid. At the last moment, it got bid out from under us for, I think, $475. And there was much wailing and tearing of clothes and gnashing of teeth. And, you know, the stories you tell yourself in order to feel better about something. Well, at least we know it exists. Somebody must really love it if they paid that much money for it, type of thing. And then a couple weeks later, one of my friends who happened to be on vacation, he didn't do this to torment us, said, hey, by the way, I was the bidder and I have it. And it was just like, whoa. And it turned out we were probably all bidding against each other, probably could have gotten it for the $15 or whatever it was originally. So the seller ended up making out on that because nobody was communicating with each other that they were bidding on it. So Mr. Rose from Washington purchased it. We had it. It's genuine. And I've brought it today because I just think this is absolutely fantastic. So you can see from the screen up there. Yeah, and you could pass it around. This is that document. So this is what was at the 72 convention. This is what John Hospers was originally reading from. So it's quite remarkable. So we spoke to the seller going, thank you. That's fine. Well, no, Diet Coke, that's fine. It's got caffeine. So we were like, okay, now the seller would talk to me. Where was this? Where did you get this from? She goes, well, my parents were the Gottliebs. They were one of, not the founders, but helped found the California Libertarian Party. And I remember when I was growing up, we had McBride and Hospers and the whole crew always in our house, you know, Libertarian Party stuff. That's what I grew up with. And she said, but my parents recently passed away, and I was cleaning out their home, and I noticed they had on their wall a framed picture of Ayn Rand. But it wasn't really like a framed picture. It was like a bad photocopy picture, but it was framed, and it was like just really shitty. And she's like, why is this up? So she took it off the wall, took it apart, and behind it was this document. And that's how we came. That's where it's been hiding these decades. And that sounds almost like a fictional story, right? Someone takes down a picture and they find a priceless piece. Okay. All right, so All right, I got 5-10 minutes, which is perfect. So there's the initial document. So now we're going to fast forward to 1974. And what happened in 1974? Well, they could have scrapped the entire Statement of Principles. They could have made it softer. They could have watered it down, whatever. They could have started over. But what did they do? They actually made it more strident in 1974. And this is what's become to be known as the Dallas Accord. So if we go to, well, it's page 10 of the handout. So scroll, and I'll tell you where to stop. It's the only color page on the Word document. If you keep scrolling, you'll see, keep going, next one, blah, 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 blah. Next one, actually, after that. With markup. Okay, so I went and compared the two Statement of Principles. So what happened in 1974 is we had a split. You had the party anarchist and the party minarchist that were ready to split the party, and this is where the party was saved again. So they decided to compromise and say that the Libertarian Party itself would take no position on whether or not in Libertopia there would be a state. Using the word government's kind of wrong, that whether there would be a state. And so the Libertarian Party is officially agnostic on whether there would be a state. Doesn't mean you have to be. I'm not. I'm an anarchist myself. But the party itself would be agnostic. And this is what they did. If you notice, the 72 Statement of Principles is different than the 74. These were the changes that were made in 1974. What you will be told if you ask anyone about the Dallas Accord is they will tell you that the Dallas Accord was an informal agreement amongst people in 1974, and it's nice, and it's cute, but it has nothing to do with us today. It was informal. And that is the biggest crock of crap there is. It was not informal. It was in writing. The Dallas Accord was made by amending the Statement of Principles, which is the most serious document that we have in the party today. So for anyone to say that it's not formal or binding, they're telling you that the Statement of Principles is not formal or binding, and I've only shown you that's not true. So that's a bold claim I'm making here, because I'm going against almost everyone in the party who says it was informal. Can I prove it? Yes, I can prove it by these highlights. These are the changes that were made in 1974. And there's something very interesting there. I've color-coded these changes, and the yellow ones are the ones we are going to take a look at. The green ones were making things gender neutral. The blue ones were like some grammar changes. But the yellow changes, what you are looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is the written Dallas Accord. People say, well, it wasn't called the Dallas Accord. Of course not. Historical events end up getting called something years after the fact. Do you think Custer's Last Stand was called Custer's Last Stand when they were all getting slaughtered? They didn't know. It was called that probably 20 years later. So now we've come to know it at the Dallas Accord. So look what happened. We used to talk about the sole function of government, and now we don't. We don't give. So what happened? Libertarians are familiar with positive and negative rights. We believe in negative rights. We don't believe in positive rights. The original Statement of Principles gave a positive role to the government. The government should do something. The government should do this. The government should do that. The current Statement of Principles only assigns a negative role to the government. The government must not do this. The government must not do that. And that is a massive change. And that makes the whole anarchy-minarchy debate no longer about that. What it is if you're a minarchist, you just have to show to me that the government's not violating rights in what it does. And if that's true, that's fine. So that ends up what the debate ends up being about. So you'll see, we no longer talk about what the sole function of government is. We say where governments exist, they must not violate the rights of individuals. So that's what the question becomes. And this was what made the party agnostic on the ultimate end goal. If a state cannot violate rights, then it's fine. If it can't, then it's not fine. So we have this very interesting language of, and if you could scroll down a little bit, we have where governments exist, and then down here, governments when instituted. So it made the very existence of government optional, and that's what happened in 1974. And yes, that is binding upon us today. And yes, it matters. Now, what's happened over the past 20 years, as I wrap this up, even though I've got like 2 hours more of stuff I could talk about that you can grab me at any time because I love it, What's happened over the years, since you can't change the statement of principles, the factions in the party decided instead they would screw around with the platform. The platform is subservient to the statement of principles. The platform is not what we believe. In fact, the preamble says the goals that are, the platform is not our goals. Our goals are nothing less than a world set free in our lifetime, which means that the platform can be transitory. All the platform has to do is be a transitory step that doesn't contradict the end game, but it's not the end game. So when people come to you and they show you the platform and says the platform talks about a role for government, that's because we're not stupid and we realize the government does exist now and we have to deal with it. But it's not advocating for government, because if it did, it'd be violating the statement of principles. The statement of principles does not advocate for government. You can, as long as you can prove it doesn't violate rights. So this is why it matters. Reading the platform, you have to read it in light of the statement of principles. One issue this comes up when is taxation is theft. Some people are denying that. They say the platform doesn't say that. It actually does, but that takes a way to get around. It doesn't matter if the platform says that or not. The platform talks about eliminating the income tax, which is a step on the road to eliminating all taxation. Funny enough, the 1974 minutes of the Libertarian Party Convention, they were very frugal. They were written on the back of a press release. I guess maybe they couldn't afford clean paper. But on the other side of the minutes of the 1974 convention minutes was one of the first press releases by the party. And it said, "Libertarians call for the abolition of all taxation." So history sometimes can be quite inconvenient for those who don't like what it says. So that's where we're at now. That is why it matters. This can heal the party if we realize we don't need to be fighting on this. And the two factions need to stop playing games with the platform in order to put in their particular pet issue. And that's where I'm at. Dallas Accord language needs to be back in the platform. I was ignorant last convention in 2016. There was something passed that I actually think violates the statement of principles. And if I had known I had the right to challenge it, I would have. And our bylaws only let you do it at convention. There was a change made in there that says the prescribed role of government is. If you were a new person, you would think that that's saying we should have government. I mean, that's a logical thing. And then when you tell them that it doesn't, they feel like they were fooled. And I don't blame them. So this convention, I will be advocating for putting back in Dallas Accord language, not just because that will heal the factions. Stop playing these stupid games. It will also be more honest to newcomers. So if you're at convention, I do ask you to take that into consideration. There will be pamphlets and all of that. But we need to stop fighting about that. It's dumb. We are so far from at a state where the anarchy-minarchy debate will even become relevant that fighting about it is just chewing our own feet off, whatever. You get it. It's maiming ourselves. We are so far away from that. So we go back to the analogy used by Brown that he didn't write, that I was told last time, that we are all on a train headed in the same direction, north. Some of us may get off earlier, but everyone who is going north, even if it's just 2 steps, that their issue is guns or this year's homeschooling, as long as they're willing to get on that train to a certain stop, we should work with them. And all of us are going on that train. And that's what this was supposed to accomplish. Now, me, allegedly, I'm waiting for the last stop. But who knows? When we get to Minarchotopia, I might like it. I might like it and get off there. But we should stop throwing people off the train. But we should also stop pretending that everything that everyone believes is on the train as well. Again, if I'm wrong on abortion, then that's not one of those things, right? Some people still really like government schools. That's okay. That's just not a libertarian idea, but that's okay. You can think that. You'll get off before we eliminate government schools. So that's the end of this. I'm going to close with the closing statement from our bylaws. And again, as you can see, I'm scrolling and scrolling because I've got a million pages because I can do this forever. Our bylaws state that, let's go back to the beginning of this handout, please. Back to page 2 or something. Our bylaws, which talks about the statement of principles. I can do it by memory, but we'll do that while he's doing that. Our bylaws say that the statement of principles states those principles upon which the Libertarian Party was founded, by which it will be sustained, and through which liberty shall prevail, which is why I call my speech, through which liberty shall prevail. This is how liberty shall prevail. As a convention delegate, when you go, now that you know the importance of this, whenever you see any proposal that touches upon the statement of principles, beware. Beware, because those are the factions and the contentious people that people like D. Frank Robinson were trying to protect from. They usually have great intentions. They're not evil people. But going that way will lead us far from where we want to go. So always remember, you're also the watchdogs of it. There will be some really terrible bylaws proposals this convention, by the way. But when you see the word statement of principles, and I didn't vote for them, when you see the word statement of principles and wanting to screw around with it, there's going to be a bylaws trying to make it no longer our primary purpose. But right now, the statement of principles is the ends. There's going to be a bylaw to try to make it the means rather than the ends. Don't fall for it. But anyway, that's it. This is beautiful. This is what we believe. This is our marching orders. And this is what we can unify around as a party while recognizing that other people may disagree. And that's okay. You know, stop throwing people from the train. No, we're done now. We're done. But I need that document back. I'm like watching it. Where is my statement of principles? Did anyone run off with? Oh, okay. See ya. Okay.